The shooting range was alive with energy on a bright Saturday morning. The air buzzed with the sharp cracks of gunfire, the smell of gunpowder lingering heavily in the breeze. Men and women of all ages stood at their designated lanes, their eyes focused on the paper targets downrange. Some wore tactical gear, their rifles gleaming under the sunlight, while others dressed casually, clearly there for fun rather than precision. Among them, however, stood an older black woman who seemed out of place in this crowd. She wasn't flashy or loud like many of the others. Instead, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her gray hoodie and worn jeans blending into the background. Her rifle caught the attention of a few curious onlookers. It wasn't new or shiny. Instead, it looked well used, its wooden stock polished smooth from years of handling. She moved slowly but deliberately, setting up her station without drawing unnecessary attention to herself. To most people passing by, she appeared to be just another person trying her hand at shooting, perhaps someone's grandmother tagging along for the day. But as she began adjusting her sights and checking her ammunition, whispers started spreading through the crowd. "Look at that," one man said to his buddy, pointing toward the woman. His voice carried just enough for those nearby to hear. "What's Grandma doing here? Did she get lost on her way to bingo night?" He chuckled loudly, elbowing his friend who joined in with a snort of laughter. Others around them glanced over, some smirking, others outright laughing. One teenager mimicked loading a rifle with exaggerated slowness, earning giggles from his group of friends. The jokes kept coming, each one harsher than the last. "She probably doesn't even know how to hold that thing," another man chimed in, his tone dripping with mockery. "Bet she'll miss the target completely." A few others nodded in agreement, feeding off the growing wave of amusement. No one paid much attention to the fact that the woman hadn't reacted to any of their comments. She simply continued preparing her equipment, her movements calm and unhurried. If anything, the teasing seemed to roll off her like water off a duck's back. To those watching closely, though, there was something intriguing about her demeanor. There was no nervous fidgeting, no hesitation in her actions. Every step she took, checking the scope, testing the weight of the rifle in her hands, positioning her feet firmly on the ground, was done with practiced ease. It was almost as if she had performed these motions thousands of times before. Still, the skeptics remained unconvinced. How could someone so unassuming possibly stand out in a place dominated by ego and bravado? The woman finally stepped up to her lane, ignoring the sideways glances and stifled chuckles from the surrounding shooters. She raised the rifle slowly, steadying it against her shoulder. Her breathing slowed, becoming rhythmic and controlled. For a brief moment, the entire range seemed to pause, curiosity overpowering mockery. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Would she embarrass herself? Or would she prove them wrong? As the seconds ticked by, the tension in the air grew palpable. Then, with a soft exhale, she pulled the trigger. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed across the range, momentarily silencing all other noise. Downrange, the target shook slightly from the impact. When the range officer retrieved it moments later, the crowd leaned forward expectantly. What they saw left them speechless. A perfect bullseye, clean and precise, right in the center of the target. For a moment, no one spoke. The same people who had laughed and joked earlier now stared in stunned disbelief. Someone muttered, That can't be real." Another whispered, "Did she cheat somehow?" But deep down, they all knew the truth. This wasn't luck. It was skill. Pure, undeniable skill. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence in front of them, none of them dared to say anything directly to the woman. They were too embarrassed, too ashamed of their earlier behavior. The woman, however, didn't seem to care. Without waiting for applause or acknowledgement, she reloaded her rifle and fired again. And again. Each shot landed exactly where the previous one had, creating a tight cluster of holes that looked almost artistic in their perfection. The murmurs returned, louder this time, filled with awe rather than ridicule. "Who is she?" someone asked, aloud, voicing the question everyone else was thinking. Slowly but surely the mood shifted. Skepticism gave way to admiration. Mockery transformed into respect. By the time the woman finished her magazine, The atmosphere at the range had changed entirely. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching, learning, marveling at the display of expertise before them. Even the biggest doubters couldn't deny what they had witnessed. As she lowered her rifle and turned to leave, one brave soul called out, "Ma'am, wait. Who are you?" For the first time since arriving, the woman paused and turned to face the crowd. Her expression was calm, unreadable. She didn't smile or boast. Instead, she simply said, "I'm Evelyn Carter, retired military sniper." With that, she walked away, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and a lesson none of them would soon forget. Evelyn's presence at the range that day wasn't just about proving a point, it was about showing the world and reminding herself that true strength lies not in seeking validation, but in staying true to who you are. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. As the morning stretched into the afternoon, the shooting range grew busier. More people arrived, eager to test their skills or simply enjoy a day outdoors with friends. Among them were groups of young men clad in tactical gear, flexing their muscles and comparing firearms like kids showing off toys. Their laughter echoed across the range as they fired rapid bursts from semi-automatic rifles, each trying to outdo the other. One of them shouted, "Watch this!" before emptying an entire magazine in seconds, leaving his target riddled with holes, but none of them close to the bullseye. The older woman, Evelyn, stood quietly at her lane, paying little attention to the chaos around her. She had already demonstrated her incredible skill earlier that day, silencing doubters with pinpoint accuracy. Now she focused on reloading her rifle methodically, her hands moving with practiced precision. While others rushed to impress, she took her time, ensuring every detail was perfect. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the frenetic energy of those nearby. A young man wearing mirrored sunglasses swaggered over to Evelyn's station. He leaned casually against the counter, smirking as he watched her work. "Hey, Grandma," he said loudly enough for his friends to hear. "You sure you know what you're doing? Need some pointers?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, and a few of his buddies snickered behind him. Evelyn didn't look up. She finished securing her magazine and glanced briefly at the man, giving him a curt nod before returning to her task. The young man hesitated, unsure if he should push further, but ultimately shrugged and walked away, muttering something under his breath about old-timers. Despite the occasional taunt or sideways glance, Evelyn remained unfazed. She seemed almost immune to the noise and distractions around her. To her, the shooting range wasn't a stage for showmanship. It was a place of focus and discipline. Each shot mattered, not because it proved anything to others, but because it reflected her dedication to mastery. As the hours passed, many shooters began to tire, their enthusiasm waning as they struggled to maintain accuracy. Some gave up entirely, packing their gear and heading home. But Evelyn stayed, patiently refining her technique. By late afternoon, the crowd had thinned considerably. Most of the loud, boastful shooters were gone, leaving behind only a handful of serious marksmen, and Evelyn. It was then that curiosity got the better of one of the remaining participants. A middle-aged man named Greg approached her cautiously, clutching his own rifle. Unlike the earlier hecklers, Greg seemed genuinely interested rather than mocking. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said respectfully. "I couldn't help but notice your shots earlier today. They were impressive." Evelyn paused and looked up at him, her expression neutral. "Thank you," she replied simply. Greg hesitated, unsure whether to press further, but his curiosity won out. "If you don't mind me asking, where did you learn to shoot like that?" Evelyn studied him for a moment before answering. "Military," she said. Just one word, yet it carried weight. Greg nodded slowly, piecing together the puzzle. "You served?" he asked. Evelyn gave a slight nod, her gaze drifting back to her rifle. Sensing she wasn't inclined to elaborate, Greg decided to change tactics. "Mind if I watch you shoot again? Maybe pick up a tip or two?" Evelyn considered his request for a moment, then gestured for him to step back slightly. Without another word, she raised her rifle, steadied her breathing, and fired. The crack of the gunshot rang out, followed by the faint rustle of the target, shaking downrange. When it was retrieved, the result was unmistakable. Another perfect bullseye. Greg let out a low whistle, clearly impressed. "That's incredible," he said. "You make it look so easy." "It's not easy," Evelyn corrected him gently. "It takes practice, focus, patience." Greg nodded, absorbing her words. Encouraged by her willingness to share, he asked, "What's your secret? How do you stay so steady?" Evelyn lowered her rifle and turned to face him fully. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself a small smile. "Breathing is key," she explained. "Most people rush. They get excited, tense up, and lose control. Slow down. Breathe deeply. Let your body settle before you pull the trigger." Greg listened intently, nodding along as Evelyn continued sharing tips. She demonstrated proper posture, showing how slight adjustments could improve stability. She talked about visualizing the shot beforehand, mentally rehearsing each step to ensure consistency. And she emphasized the importance of staying calm, under pressure, a lesson she'd learned through years of high-stakes missions. By the time she finished speaking, Greg felt like he'd gained more insight in 10 minutes than he had in months of practicing on his own. Word of Evelyn's expertise spread quickly among the remaining shooters. One by one, they approached her, laying, some seeking advice, others merely wanting to observe. To their surprise, Evelyn welcomed them all, offering guidance without hesitation. She didn't lecture or boast. Instead, she shared her knowledge generously, treating everyone with respect regardless of their skill level. Even those who had mocked her earlier found themselves drawn to her quiet authority. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the range, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. Gone were the jeers and jokes of the morning. In their place was a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. Shooters who had once competed fiercely now worked together, helping each other improve. And at the center of it all was Evelyn, whose presence had transformed the dynamic of the entire range. Before packing up to leave, Greg extended an invitation. "Ma'am, we're grabbing dinner nearby after this. Would you care to join us?" Evelyn hesitated, surprised by the offer. Social gatherings weren't really her thing, but there was something sincere about Greg's tone. After a moment's thought, she nodded. "Sure," she said softly. "Why not?" The group headed to a local diner, filling a corner booth with lively conversation. At first, Evelyn sat quietly, listening as the others recounted stories from the range. But as the evening wore on, she began opening up, sharing snippets of her life and experiences. She spoke of the challenges she faced as a Black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated field, of the long deployments, the sacrifices, and the moments of triumph that made it all worthwhile. Her words resonated deeply with everyone present, inspiring both admiration and reflection. By the end of the meal, the initial tension between Evelyn and the others had dissolved entirely. What started as a day filled with mockery and disbelief had ended in connection and understanding. And though Evelyn would likely never see most of these people again, she knew she had left an indelible mark, not just on their shooting skills, but on their perspective. The following weeks brought a noticeable change to the shooting range. Word of Evelyn's extraordinary skills had spread far beyond that initial Saturday, drawing curious visitors and seasoned marksmen alike. Some came out of sheer fascination, eager to witness the legendary Grandma sniper in action for themselves. Others arrived with questions, hoping to glean even a fraction of her expertise. The once dismissive crowd now greeted her with nods of respect, their earlier mockery replaced by admiration. And perhaps a touch of embarrassment. Evelyn, however, remained unchanged. She continued visiting the range regularly, always arriving quietly and setting up her station without fanfare. Her rifle, though well-worn, still gleamed with care, its every scratch telling a story of years spent mastering the art of precision. To those who didn't know her, she might have appeared unremarkable, a quiet older woman blending into the background. But to those who had seen her shoot, she was nothing short of extraordinary. One afternoon, as Evelyn prepared for her session, A young man approached her hesitantly. He looked barely old enough to shave, his hands clutching a brand new rifle like it might bite him. Ma'am," he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. "I heard about what you did last week. Could you, maybe show me how to hold my gun better? I've been practicing, but I keep missing." Evelyn glanced at him, noting the nervousness in his eyes and the slight tremor in his grip. Without a word, she gestured for him to step closer. She began by examining his stance, pointing out subtle adjustments he could make to improve balance. Then, she guided his hands into position on the rifle, ensuring his fingers rested correctly on the trigger. "Relax," she instructed softly. "Tension will throw off your aim. Let your body settle before you pull the trigger." The young man nodded, visibly trying to follow her advice. When he finally fired, the bullet landed much closer to the center of the target than any of his previous attempts. His face lit up with excitement. "Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much." Evelyn gave him a small, approving smile. "You're welcome," she said simply. "Keep practicing. You'll get there." Encouraged by her kindness, the young man stuck around, asking more questions and soaking up every bit of wisdom she offered. By the end of the day, he wasn't just hitting the target. He was improving steadily, thanks to Evelyn's patient guidance. This became a pattern over the
next few weeks.
Shooters from all walks of life sought out Evelyn's advice, each one leaving with newfound confidence and sharper skills. Some were beginners struggling to understand the basics, others were experienced marksmen looking to refine their techniques. Regardless of their level, Evelyn treated them all the same, with patience, humility, and an unwavering commitment to teaching. She never boasted about her accomplishments or demanded recognition. Instead, she let her actions speak for themselves, proving time and again why she was respected not just for her skill, but also for her character. One particularly memorable day, a group of competitive shooters showed up at the range, determined to test their abilities against Evelyn's. They were veterans of local tournaments known for their speed and accuracy. As they set up their stations, they challenged Evelyn to a friendly competition. At first, she declined politely, explaining that she wasn't interested in competing. But when they persisted, joking that they needed to see if the rumors about her were true, she finally agreed, on one condition. "It's not about winning," she told them firmly. "It's about learning." The challenge began with a series of timed rounds, each shooter taking turns firing at increasingly difficult targets. The competitors moved quickly, their shots rapid and forceful. Evelyn, meanwhile, took her time, focusing intently on each shot before pulling the trigger. While the others prioritized speed, she emphasized precision, landing every bullet exactly where she intended. By the end of the first round, it was clear who had the upper hand. Evelyn's scores were flawless, while her opponent's haste had led to mistakes. Rather than feeling defeated, the competitors found themselves inspired. One of them, a burly man named Marcus, shook his head in disbelief. "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" he asked during a break. Evelyn shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "It's not about staying calm," she replied. "It's about preparation. If you train hard enough, you won't need to think when it matters most. Your instincts will guide you." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words. From that moment on, he and his teammates stopped rushing and started focusing on technique, mirroring Evelyn's deliberate approach. As the weeks went by, Evelyn's influence extended beyond individual lessons. The entire culture of the range began to shift. Gone were the days of loud boasting and reckless firing. In their place emerged a community built on mutual respect and shared growth. Shooters encouraged one another, offering tips and celebrating improvements. Even those who had initially mocked Evelyn now admitted openly that they had been wrong. "We judged her too quickly," one man confessed to a friend. "She's not just good, she's incredible. And she taught us all a lesson we won't forget." Despite the growing admiration, Evelyn remained humble. She didn't seek attention or praise. Instead, she focused on what mattered most to her, the joy of doing something she loved. For her, the shooting range wasn't about proving superiority or earning accolades. It was about discipline, connection, and passing on knowledge to the next generation. Every time someone thanked her for her help, she simply smiled and said, "You earned it yourself, I just pointed the way." Her generosity extended beyond technical advice. On several occasions, Evelyn shared stories from her military days, offering insights into the mental and emotional challenges of being a sniper. She spoke candidly about the weight of responsibility, the loneliness of long deployments, and the pride of knowing her skills saved lives. These conversations resonated deeply with those who listened, reminding them that mastery required more than physical skill. It demanded resilience, focus, and heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the range, a young girl approached Evelyn shyly. Clutching a toy rifle, she looked up at Evelyn with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can I be like you when I grow up?" she asked softly. Evelyn knelt down to meet the child's gaze, her expression softening. "Of course you can," she said gently. "But remember this, it's not about being the best. It's about working hard, staying humble, and believing in yourself. Even when others don't." The girl beamed, clutching her toy tighter as if holding on to Evelyn's words. By the time Evelyn packed up her gear and headed home that night, the range felt different, warmer, more connected. People lingered longer, sharing stories and laughter, united by a shared sense of purpose. Evelyn may have walked away unnoticed, disappearing into the twilight, but her impact lingered long after she was gone. Through her quiet strength and unwavering dedication, she had transformed not just the shooting range but the hearts and minds of everyone fortunate enough to cross her path. As the weeks turned into months, Evelyn's presence at the shooting range became a regular fixture. Her visits weren't frequent enough to make her a constant, but when she did show up, the entire atmosphere of the place seemed to shift. Shooters, who had once dismissed her as an unassuming older woman, now greeted her with genuine warmth and respect. Some even went out of their way to reserve a lane near hers, hoping to pick up tips or simply observe her technique. The transformation in the community was undeniable, a stark contrast to the mockery and skepticism that had greeted her on her first day. One crisp Saturday morning, Evelyn arrived at the range earlier than usual. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dew clinging to the grass. She set up her station quietly as always, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Today, however, something felt different. A small group of young women stood nearby, whispering among themselves while glancing nervously in Evelyn's direction. One of them finally mustered the courage to approach her. "Excuse me, ma'am," the girl said hesitantly. Evelyn looked up from adjusting her rifle sights, her expression calm but curious. "Yes?" she replied softly. The young woman shifted uncomfortably, clutching her own rifle tightly. We heard about you," she admitted, "about how good you are, and, well, we were wondering if you'd be willing to teach us. We're trying to get better, but it's hard without someone showing us what to do." Evelyn studied the group for a moment. They couldn't have been more than teenagers, their faces eager yet uncertain. Many of them were dressed in oversized jackets and borrowed gear, clearly beginners. Despite their lack of experience, there was determination in their eyes, a spark of ambition that reminded Evelyn of herself at their age. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Let's start with the basics." Over the next hour, Evelyn worked patiently with the group, guiding them through the fundamentals of marksmanship. She taught them how to hold their rifles properly, emphasizing the importance of posture and balance. She showed them breathing techniques, explaining how steady inhalations could steady not just their bodies, but also their minds. When one of the girls grew frustrated after missing her target repeatedly, Evelyn knelt beside her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't rush," she said gently. "Every shot is a lesson. Learn from it." By the end of the session, the young women were visibly more confident. Their shots may not have been perfect, but they were improving. And that was what mattered most to Evelyn. As they thanked her profusely and headed off to practice further, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Watching these girls grow reminded her of why she had chosen to return to the range week after week, to inspire others, to pass on the lessons she had learned over decades of service. Later that afternoon, as the crowd at the range began to thin, a familiar face approached Evelyn. It was Greg, the middle-aged man who had invited her to dinner during her first visit. He carried 2 cups of coffee, offering one to her with a friendly smile. "Thought you might need this," he said. Evelyn accepted it gratefully, taking a sip before nodding toward his rifle. "Still practicing?" she asked. Greg chuckled. "Trying to," he admitted. "But I think I've plateaued. No matter how much I practice, I can't seem to improve." Evelyn listened thoughtfully, then gestured for him to join her at her lane. "Sometimes," she explained, "the problem isn't with your aim, it's with your mindset." She handed him her rifle, instructing him to take a few test shots while focusing solely on his breathing. At first, Greg struggled to adjust to the unfamiliar weight of her weapon, but after a few tries, he began to relax. His shots improved noticeably, earning a satisfied nod from Evelyn. "See," she said, "it's not always about the gun. It's about how you use it." Greg grinned, shaking his head in amazement. "You really should write a book or something," he joked. "People would pay big money to learn from you." Evelyn laughed softly, dismissing the idea with a wave of her hand. "I'm not here for fame," she replied. "I'm here because I love it. If I can help someone along the way, that's enough for me." The conversation eventually turned to Evelyn's past. Greg had pieced together bits of her story from previous encounters, but he still had questions many others shared. "What made you decide to come back to the range?" he asked carefully. Evelyn paused, considering his words. For a moment she stared downrange, her gaze distant as if recalling memories long buried. "When I retired," she began slowly, "I thought I'd leave all this behind. Shooting was part of my job. It wasn't supposed to follow me into civilian life. But after a while I realized I missed it. Not the competition or the accolades, but the discipline, the focus. Being here reminds me of who I am and who I used to be." She glanced at Greg, her expression softening. "And sometimes it feels good to remind others of what they're capable of." Her words resonated deeply with Greg, who found himself reflecting on his own journey. Like many at the range, he had initially come seeking entertainment, a hobby to fill idle weekends. But thanks to Evelyn, he had discovered something far greater, a sense of purpose. Shooting had become more than just a pastime. It was a way to challenge himself, to push beyond his limits. And knowing that Evelyn, a true master of the craft, believed in his potential gave him the confidence to keep going. As the sun dipped, lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the range, another visitor approached Evelyn. This time it was Marcus, the burly competitor from weeks earlier. He no longer carried the brash arrogance that had defined him during their initial encounter. Instead, he seemed almost sheepish as he extended a hand toward Evelyn. "I wanted to say thanks," he said earnestly. "For everything. You didn't have to help us back then, but you did. And it made a difference." Evelyn shook his hand firmly, her expression warm. "You're welcome," she said simply. "Just don't forget what you've learned." Marcus nodded, his gratitude evident. Before leaving, he added, "If you ever want to team up for a tournament, let me know. I think we'd make a pretty unbeatable pair." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, amused by the suggestion, but didn't respond. Competitive events weren't her style, and Marcus knew it. Still, the offer spoke volumes about how far their relationship had come, from adversaries to allies. By the time Evelyn packed up her gear and prepared to leave, the range had emptied significantly. Only a few stragglers remained, packing their equipment and exchanging final goodbyes. As she walked toward her car, she noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper. Curious, she unfolded it and read the handwritten note. Inside, "Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. We won't forget it." There was no signature, just those simple, heartfelt words. Evelyn smiled faintly, tucking the note into her pocket. She climbed into her car and started the engine, the hum of the motor blending with the fading sounds of the range. As she drove away, she reflected on the impact she had made, not just on individual lives, but on an entire community. In teaching others, she had rediscovered pieces of herself, reaffirming the values that had guided her throughout her life: humility, perseverance, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to succeed. Though Evelyn didn't seek recognition, her legacy was already cemented. Through quiet acts of kindness and unwavering dedication, she had transformed a place of judgment and ridicule into one of growth and connection. And as long as people continued to share her lessons, her influence would endure for years, perhaps even generations to come. As the seasons changed, so too did the shooting range. What had once been a place of casual recreation and occasional rivalry had evolved into something far more meaningful: a community bound together by shared goals, mutual respect, and a deep appreciation for the art of marksmanship. Evelyn Carter remained at the heart of this transformation, though she never sought to be its leader or figurehead. Her presence alone was enough to inspire those around her, drawing people from all walks of life who wanted to learn, grow, and connect. One chilly autumn morning, Evelyn arrived at the range to find an unexpected sight: a group of teenagers setting up targets and arranging equipment with surprising efficiency. They moved with purpose, their laughter mingling with the crisp air as they prepared for the day ahead. When one of them spotted Evelyn approaching, he waved enthusiastically. "Hey, Evelyn," he called out. "We've been waiting for you." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, amused by the greeting. She hadn't planned anything special for the day, just another quiet session to practice her craft. But as she drew closer, she realized these weren't ordinary teenagers. Many of them were part of a local youth program aimed at teaching discipline and responsibility through activities like archery, martial arts, and most recently, shooting sports. The young woman who had approached her weeks earlier with her group of friends stood among them, now wearing a confident smile. "We talked to our coach," the girl explained, gesturing toward the others. "He said we could bring you in as a guest instructor today. If that's okay with you, of course." Evelyn hesitated, unsure whether she was ready to take on such a formal role. Teaching a few individuals here and there was one thing. Leading an entire class felt like another challenge entirely. Sensing her hesitation, the girl added quickly, "You don't have to say yes right away. We just thought, well, it would mean a lot to us." Evelyn studied the group for a moment, noting the eager expressions on their faces. These kids weren't just looking for tips. They were seeking guidance, someone to believe in them. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said. "Let's see what you've got." Over the next several hours, Evelyn led the group through a series of exercises designed to build both skill and confidence. She started with the basics, ensuring everyone understood proper safety protocols before moving on to techniques like stance, grip, and breathing control. To her surprise, the teenagers absorbed her lessons quickly, asking thoughtful questions and applying her advice with remarkable focus. Some struggled initially, but Evelyn encouraged them patiently, reminding them that improvement came not from perfection but persistence. By midday, the group had made significant progress. One boy, whose hands had trembled uncontrollably during his first attempt, managed to land a shot close to the bullseye after multiple tries. His grin was infectious, spreading to the others as they cheered him on. Even Evelyn allowed herself a small smile, proud of their determination. "Good work," she told them. "Remember, every shot teaches you something. Keep learning." After the session ended, the teenagers gathered around Evelyn, thanking her profusely. "You're amazing," one of them said earnestly. "I didn't think I could do this, but now I feel like I can actually get better." Another chimed in, "Yeah, and you make it seem so easy." Evelyn chuckled softly. "It's not easy," she corrected gently, "but if you put in the effort, you'll see results. That's true for anything worth doing." The experience left Evelyn feeling unexpectedly fulfilled. For years, she had kept her military background private, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. Yet seeing the impact she had on these young lives reminded her of the importance of sharing her story, not for personal gain, but to inspire others to overcome their own challenges. As she packed up her gear and prepared to leave, the youth program's coach approached her, extending a hand. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "These kids needed someone like you, someone who understands what it means to push past doubt and fear." Evelyn shook his hand, nodding slightly. "They're good kids," she replied. "They just need a little encouragement." The coach smiled, glancing back at the group. "And you gave them more than that. You showed them what's possible." Later that week, Evelyn received an invitation she hadn't anticipated. A local veterans organization had heard about her reputation at the shooting range and reached out, asking if she'd be willing to speak at an upcoming event. At first, Evelyn declined politely, citing her preference for staying out of the spotlight. But when the organizer explained that the gathering was meant to honor women who had served in the military, she reconsidered. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to share a piece of her journey, not for herself, but for those who might benefit from hearing it. The evening of the event arrived, and Evelyn found herself standing in front of a room full of strangers, many of whom wore uniforms or carried mementos of their service. She felt a pang of nervousness as she took the stage, clutching a microphone in her hands. The audience fell silent, their attention fixed on her. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn began to speak. "I wasn't always sure I belonged in the military," she admitted, her voice steady despite her initial apprehension. "When I enlisted, there weren't many people who looked like me or who believed I could succeed. But I knew one thing. I wanted to serve my country, and I was determined to prove that I could hold my own, no matter the odds." She went on to describe the challenges she faced as a black woman in a male-dominated field, from enduring skepticism and prejudice to proving her capabilities time and again. She spoke of the long deployments, the sleepless nights, and the moments of triumph that made it all worthwhile. Most importantly, she emphasized the values that had guided her throughout her career: resilience, humility, and an unwavering belief in the power of hard work. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Several attendees approached her afterward, expressing gratitude for her words. "You've given us hope," one veteran said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Hearing your story reminds me that we're not alone." Evelyn nodded, touched by the sentiment. Though she had entered the room uncertain of her ability to inspire, she left knowing she had made a difference. Back at the shooting range, Evelyn continued to mentor newcomers, offering guidance and encouragement whenever needed. Her influence extended beyond technical skills. She taught lessons about perseverance, teamwork, and self-belief. Shooters of all ages and backgrounds came to view her not just as a teacher, but as a role model, a living testament to the idea that greatness is achieved not through arrogance but through dedication and heart. One day, as Evelyn prepared to leave after a particularly fulfilling session, a young girl ran up to her, clutching a handmade card. "This is for you," she said shyly, thrusting the colorful paper into Evelyn's hands. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for showing me I can be strong." Evelyn's throat tightened as she read the words. She knelt down to meet the girl's gaze, her expression softening. "You already are strong," she said gently. "Never forget that." The girl beamed, skipping away to rejoin her family. As Evelyn watched her go, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the praise or recognition, but for the opportunity to help others discover their potential. Though Evelyn never sought fame or accolades, her legacy continued to grow. Through quiet acts of kindness and steadfast commitment to her principles, she had transformed not only the shooting range, but the lives of countless individuals. And as long as her lessons endured, her impact would ripple outward, inspiring generations to come. The months rolled on, and Evelyn's influence at the shooting range became as natural as the rhythm of the seasons themselves. What had once been a place of fleeting encounters and hollow boasts had transformed into a sanctuary of growth and connection. People came not just to shoot, but to learn, to share, and to belong. For many, Evelyn was the thread that wove this community together, a quiet force of nature whose presence inspired everyone around her. One brisk winter morning, Evelyn arrived at the range to find an unusual sight. A banner strung across the entrance, its bright colors standing out against the gray sky. "Welcome back, Evelyn," it read in bold letters. Beneath it stood a group of familiar faces: Greg, Marcus, the young women from the youth program, and even some newcomers who had heard stories about her. They clapped and cheered as she approached, their smiles warm and genuine. Evelyn blinked, in surprise, momentarily taken aback by the gesture. "What's all this?" she asked, her tone light but curious. Greg stepped forward, grinning. "We wanted to do something special for you," he explained. "You've done so much for us, taught us, inspired us, changed the way we think about shooting. We figured it was time we showed our appreciation." Before Evelyn could respond, Marcus handed her a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a custom-made rifle sling, embroidered with intricate designs that included her initials and a subtle nod to her military service. It was simple yet elegant, crafted with care. Evelyn traced her fingers over the stitching, her expression softening. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "Thank you." The group beamed, clearly pleased with her reaction, but the surprises didn't end there. As Evelyn set up her station later that day, she noticed a steady stream of visitors stopping by to express their gratitude. Some brought small gifts: a thermos of hot coffee, a handmade card, or a photograph of themselves holding a target with a near-perfect bullseye. Others simply shared heartfelt words, recounting how her guidance had helped them overcome challenges both on and off the range. One man, a middle-aged father named Tom, pulled Evelyn aside during a break. His voice cracked with emotion as he spoke. "I didn't think I'd ever be good at this," he admitted. "But you believed in me when no one else did, not even myself. Because of you, I've started teaching my son how to shoot. He looks up to me now, and that's something I'll never forget." Evelyn listened intently, her eyes soft with understanding. "You did the hard work," she replied. "I just pointed you in the right direction." By the end of the day, Evelyn felt a deep sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. The outpouring of gratitude wasn't about her, it was about what she represented: resilience, humility, and the belief that anyone could achieve greatness with enough effort and heart. Though she had always preferred to stay in the background, she realized now that her actions had created ripples far beyond what she'd imagined. As the weeks passed, Evelyn began receiving invitations to speak at various events: schools, community centers, and even corporate workshops focused on leadership and teamwork. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was the right person for such roles. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized these opportunities were a chance to spread her message further. She accepted a few invitations, always emphasizing the same core principles: focus, discipline, and the importance of lifting others up. One evening, after speaking at a local high school career fair, Evelyn found herself surrounded by students eager to ask questions. One boy, barely taller than his backpack, raised his hand timidly. "Did you ever feel like giving up?" he asked. Evelyn smiled faintly, recalling the countless times doubt had crept into her mind. "Of course I did," she admitted. "There were days when it felt like the world was against me, but I learned that every challenge is an opportunity to grow, to adapt, to prove yourself. Don't let fear stop you. Keep pushing forward, even when it's hard." Her answer seemed to resonate deeply with the audience. When the session ended, several students lingered, asking for advice or simply thanking her for her honesty. One girl, clutching a notebook filled with scribbled notes, looked up at Evelyn with shining eyes. "You're my hero," she said softly. Evelyn chuckled, touched by the sentiment. "Just remember this," she told the girl. "Heroes aren't born, they're made, and you have everything you need inside you to become whoever you want to be." Back at the shooting range, life continued as usual. Newcomers arrived regularly, drawn by tales of the legendary Grandma Sniper, who could teach anyone to hit the bullseye. Experienced shooters returned, eager to refine their skills under Evelyn's watchful eye. Even those who had initially mocked her now greeted her warmly, often staying late to chat or help clean up. The range had become more than just a place to practice. It was a home for people seeking connection, purpose, and growth. One sunny afternoon, as Evelyn prepared to leave, a young boy ran up to her, clutching a toy rifle. "Can I be a sniper like you when I grow up?" he asked excitedly. Evelyn knelt down to meet his gaze, her expression thoughtful. "Being a sniper isn't just about shooting straight," she explained gently. "It's about patience, focus, and making tough decisions. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility?" The boy nodded earnestly. "Yes, I want to be strong like you." Evelyn smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then start practicing now," she said. "Work hard, stay humble, and never give up, even when things get tough. That's how you become strong." As the boy scampered off, Evelyn stood and glanced around the range. The laughter, the chatter, the camaraderie, it all reminded her of why she kept coming back. This wasn't just about teaching people how to shoot. It was about showing them they were capable of more than they realized. It was about creating a space where everyone belonged, regardless of age, gender, or background. Years later, long after Evelyn had stopped visiting the range as frequently, her legacy endured. Shooters still spoke of her with reverence, passing down her lessons to new generations. Her name became synonymous with excellence, humility, and kindness, a reminder that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in lifting them up. On a quiet spring day, a young woman stood at the range, her rifle steady in her hands. She exhaled slowly, pulling the trigger with precision. The bullet struck the center of the target with a satisfying thud. Turning to her instructor, she grinned, proudly. "I did it, just like Evelyn taught me." Her instructor, a former student of Evelyn's, nodded approvingly. "She'd be proud," he said. "And she'd tell you to keep going. There's always more to learn." Though Evelyn was no longer physically present, her spirit lived on in the hearts of those she had touched. Through quiet acts of kindness and unwavering dedication, she had transformed not just a shooting range but an entire community. And as long as her lessons were remembered, her impact would continue to ripple outward, inspiring countless lives for generations to come.